Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. We are coming up on the end of Warzone. MW2 and Warzone 2 are now less than 3 months away, and after that happens, Warzone is not really going to be a main priority. Warzone 1, I should say. So today, I wanted to take sort of a look back at what Warzone has been over the past few years, sort of talk about the highs, the lows, sort of a retrospective evolution, if you will, because it's been an interesting ride so far, and you know, it is somewhat bittersweet that Warzone 1 is coming to an end. Obviously, this game has been a massive part of my channel's success and plenty of other creators as well. It also, though, is it's a good thing that Warzone 2 is coming, because it's going to fix a lot of the big issues that we have with Warzone 1 right now. But of course, Warzone launched back during Season 2 of MW 2019. It was a brand new mode. In fact, it didn't really have any marketing for it. It just popped up on the menu as a classified tab with a countdown. 24 hours later, Warzone was here. And quite frankly, no one was ready for Warzone. That includes the players, that includes the devs, because it took off. Of course, Warzone dropped just before the world essentially shut down temporarily, so everyone was jumping on Xbox, PlayStation, their PC to grind Warzone, the newest battle royale, and Warzone blew up. It was the most popular battle royale. It was the most popular game for a decent while there while we were all stuck inside. And that sort of set an unprecedented level of hype for a game, but I feel like it also built a pretty extreme amount of expectations as well, which, as I'm sure you probably know, over the course of time from that point on up until now, haven't always been met. Now, back when Warzone did launch, it just launched with Verdansk, as it's also known. It was a brand new play space comprised of a lot of locations from MW 2019 multiplayer, specifically with Ground War, and it only featured 2 modes, Battle Royale and Plunder, and that was it. And for the first while that Warzone was out, it was limited to just trios. You might remember, we didn't have solos, we didn't have duos, we didn't have quads for quite some time. It took several updates for those other modes to be added back in. I cannot imagine how angry the Warzone community would be nowadays if we only had trios for weeks on end. So quite a different experience looking back all the way to launch. However, you ask Warzone players what they thought was the best time of Warzone, a lot would consider that sort of start there where it was only trios, the game was brand new, to be sort of the golden era of Warzone, which is somewhat unfortunate because that was when the game was at its earliest, at its youngest. It didn't really have that much detail into it compared to what it's got going on now, and that era was also the shortest out of all the quote-unquote eras that we've seen in Warzone. The Modern Warfare era, which is what again many people would consider to be the GOAT era of Warzone, didn't even last a full year because the game dropped in early 2020, and by late 2020 we had Cold War and the first ever Warzone integration, so we didn't even get a full content year of Modern Warfare put into Warzone 1 like we obviously have had with Cold War and Vanguard by the time that this whole year comes to a close and MW2 is here. Now, for what it's worth, MW's era of Warzone had some of my favorite moments ever. Specifically when it comes to the gameplay, the Easter eggs, the intel missions, those were things that stood out to me the most that I miss a ton nowadays because we just don't have them to the same capacity. We have a few Easter eggs here and there, but nothing on the levels of the stadium Easter egg where you had to find all the ciphers and figure out which codes meant what. We had the weekly or bi-weekly intel missions that told the Warzone storyline, the secret subway that brought you over to the station underneath the dam that gave you blueprints and specialists and all sorts of cool stuff like that. It was so much fun to experience all of that, and it really made the game feel like it had layers to it. Yes, it was a battle royale, but there was also a story aspect to it. There were secret missions you could do inside of a battle royale game. It was super cool. But the MW era was not perfect, and we're going to circle back around to that towards the end of the video. Real quick, before we move on, just a heads up if you are new to the channel or if you have not already subscribed, every day I got you covered with all things going on in COD, news, updates, loadouts, occasionally videos like this that are a little bit more relaxed and, you know, nostalgic, if you will. If you want to catch that content daily, feel free to hit that sub button and turn on those post notifications. But of course, come the end of the MW era, we were introduced into the Cold War era. However, that integration, the first ever integration that we saw for Warzone, would also be the start of some of the most controversial days in the game's history. This forced all the new content of Cold War into a game that, quite frankly, could not handle it. The truth is, Warzone was not ready to support multiple CODs, at least from a technical standpoint. In terms of an overarching story and what Warzone is, absolutely. Integrations would be awesome for it, and they are awesome for it, but from a technical standpoint, what Warzone is, it wasn't ready for this. It was built into Modern Warfare 2019 as a third game mode, just like Zombies would be, just like Spec Ops would be. It wasn't even meant to go into a year two. You may recall some of the fire team maps that we had in Cold War. It ended up leaking out that those were all maps that were meant to comprise a brand new Blackout map. We were supposed to be going back to Blackout for a second year of that after a year of Warzone, and presumably we were going to flip-flop between Warzone and Blackout every other year, but they saw Warzone take off and skyrocket in its first few months, and they said, okay, we gotta scrap the Blackout idea. We're sticking with Warzone. Just add the new game into that, and that's where things started to snowball in some negative ways. So you had this huge peak with Warzone, sort of pun intended with the location now, obviously, and then you hit that peak and the Cold War integration happens, and you start to then timber down a little bit. With things like broken guns, we had the DMR meta going on for weeks without it getting fixed. You might recall back during the Cold War integration, attachments didn't even do what they were supposed to do for months. We had broken attachments where they were doing completely incorrect things. Secret changes were being made. The patch notes were not always accurate. They would make adjustments that were never mentioned. There was new content, but no technical upgrades either, so we still didn't have console FOV despite it being in Cold War. It was just kind of a mess. And despite Cold War not being the most popular of games and all the issues that it brought to Warzone when that integration happened, that still wasn't the lowest point for Warzone. That was yet to come, in our look back here. We got that coming up next. But also, the Cold War era, while again, that game was not necessarily the most well-received, also was not that bad. Verdansk was still around, so that in itself was a W. And frankly, Verdansk 84, that was a great version of the map, in my opinion. I really liked how it played. We had things like the Vault Easter egg during the Heroes event there, where you could go into Nakatomi Tower and get all the cash specialist bonus, run around the map. That was super cool. They added in the very first alternative map with Rebirth, which, while it started off slow and people had to sort of get used to that style of gameplay, Rebirth would eventually become Warzone's most popular map during Vanguard here. So the Cold War era may not be remembered for being all that great because it's not Modern Warfare. It still brought a lot of really good things into the game. It also was where Raven took over, and that's where we started to see more communication. The updates were a little bit more frequent, and that would sort of trend up here into the Vanguard era. And unfortunately, from the get-go, Vanguard just didn't really have the hype. For the game itself and for the Warzone integration, everyone heard World War II Call of Duty and kind of shrugged it off right away. And the start of the integration definitely did not help its case. People were already skeptical about this game, and then the integration happened and Warzone met its most broken state ever. Vanguard's launch came just a week or so before the devs went on a holiday break for Christmas and New Year's and everything, and that meant that the game was not going to be updated frequently because all the devs were out of office. This meant that we had Krampus running around wild on Caldera. The games were crashing like crazy. There were demon textures all over the weapons so you couldn't see. PlayStation and Xbox players couldn't even play the game. We got an anti-cheat, didn't necessarily work the greatest. It's sort of evolved since then, but it stopped some cheaters. Still was a major problem though. And just that launch, it did not sit well with a lot of players. That turned a lot of players away from Warzone. And some of them have yet to return because World War II obviously still going on now with Vanguard, with that coming to a close at the end of Warzone 1 when MW2 launches. But while Season 1 was absolutely a disaster, if you will, for Warzone, slowly, season after season, Warzone's gameplay did improve. There's no denying that. Stability came back. Games were not crashing every single match. The demon guns eventually went away. Caldera was not really well received at the start because the map had a lot of weak spots. They mainly consisted of too much shrubbery so you couldn't see anything. There was just too much flora, basically. Other parts of the map had wide open hillsides where you were fighting up hills, so they ended up cutting down a lot of the shrubs, making the visibility a lot better. They filled in these wide open areas so you weren't running through huge fields to promote faster paced gameplay. So slowly but surely things were turned around. We also got the addition of Fortune's Keep recently, giving us 3 map options to play on for the first time in Warzone history. And while many players will say that Vanguard in Warzone was not great, it's interesting because we have a very strange dynamic looking back at the Modern Warfare era of Warzone and then the evolution through to Vanguard's era, because the Modern Warfare era, as I mentioned earlier, is the quote-unquote golden days of Warzone, right, if you ask most players. But the gameplay, while it was fresh and fun and unique, maybe even more so than now, was not perfect. People miss Verdansk and the 2020 year of gameplay, at least they say they do, but when you look back at it, what was, what else was going on in those times, the golden days, if you will? Hackers were absolutely everywhere. There was no anti-cheat, and let's be honest, Ricochet is not perfect, but cheating now is way better than it was before. There are not nearly as many cheaters in Warzone now as there were back on Verdansk. When I would play, it was basically every night you were guaranteed to run into cheaters. I can play now and go a week without seeing a confirmed cheater, and that straight up is a huge improvement. The cheaters, the hackers, were ridiculous back on Verdansk. Every update back then, keep in mind, updates were not that frequent. We saw maybe 2 major updates per season because they didn't like to have massive downloads when everyone was at home stuck online. So they didn't have title updates all that frequently, or even playlist updates and gameplay fix updates like what we have now, a couple times per half season, really. So every time we saw an update back then, there would be a new version of the stim glitch or a new gas mask glitch. So players would be exploiting wins constantly. We couldn't climb up half of Verdansk because there were all the rocks that your player could just not climb. So that was super annoying. Zones would pull to those areas and you'd just be dead because you couldn't interact with the world correctly. And, was running up 25 floors of stairs just to die to a team pre-aiming the doorway with Bettys and Claymores all over the place really something that we missed? Was the ATC tower really something that we all missed? Not to mention, there were a lot of broken weapons, snake shots, the FAMAS, the FAMAS shotgun underbarrel, or what it was, the hit scan SPR, that one was fun, but, still very broken, etc., etc. Warzone's gameplay from a technical standpoint was really not all that bad during MW, but over time, when players started to turn away from the game because the content was not what they enjoyed, that's when devs became more interactive, more transparent. They took community feedback more into account. Updates became a lot more frequent, and that's really only improved since the golden days. So gameplay, at least is, from certain design aspects with the themes, World War II, Cold War, all that stuff, well, that might not be something players enjoy. The communication, the updates, the transparency, that's very, very important for what Warzone is, and really a big reason why the game is still active right now, and it's doing a lot better than what it could be if we still had similar lines of communication and similar update schedules to before. So now here we are. We're less than 2 months out from MW2 dropping, less than 3 months out from Warzone 2 dropping, and we're in a place where gameplay really is not all that popular, especially compared back to the MW days. It's mainly because of Vanguard. But the communication, the updates, the transparency, the content previews, etc., it's all great. And back in 2020 when the game dropped, we had very popular gameplay with infrequent updates and lackluster communications, so it's weird. We're on complete inverses with both of those. Great gameplay, not so great updates and communication. Now, meh gameplay, great updates, great communication. It's just kind of weird how that's played out. So has Warzone really ever been perfect? I don't think so. Has it been the game that's, kept some COD activity alive in the community? And has it really been the through line of these games, being a lot more successful than they probably would have been standalone with Cold War and Vanguard? Absolutely. Are there things that I would change about Warzone? 100%. It should not have been a multi-year project if it couldn't handle technical upgrades to make the game more optimized and smooth as we got new content. Honestly, after the Cold War integration happened, they should have cut Warzone out of MW 2019, made it its own separate application, and been able to update it for next-gen capabilities once all that became available. The integrations probably should not have happened a couple of weeks before all the devs went out for a holiday break. They probably should have happened afterwards so that we didn't have weeks of broken content, broken weapons, broken bugs and glitches. But at the same time, if Warzone didn't do exactly what it did for the past 2.5 years or whatever, there wouldn't have necessarily been those mistakes to learn from with Warzone 2. Going into Warzone 2, we are under the full assumption that the main problems, the main issues that caused Warzone to not be able to ride that peak towards the end of the MW era for longer, all that's going to be addressed. Optimization, the way that they approach updates, when they approach updates, everything like that is going to be taken into account for Warzone 2. So we have this weird sort of, continuous upgrade of Battle Royale in Call of Duty. Initially, Blackout walked so Warzone could run. Now I think Blackout walked so Warzone could skip so Warzone 2 could run, because truly I think as we approach the end of Warzone here, and as this becomes the non-priority Battle Royale with Warzone 2 about to drop, everything that we don't love about Warzone right now will have been heard, and those mistakes, that experience is going to be a great teacher for the next game, which truly is going to be the most prepared version of Call of Duty Battle Royale that we've ever seen. That said, I could not be happier that Warzone dropped, because obviously it's a huge part of where I'm at right now with the channel. It's the main content on the channel, and it's been an incredible 2 years of fun gameplay. Sure, there were annoying things, there were bugs, there were glitches, but at the end of the day, I'm coming back consistently to play this game because I enjoy it. It's fun, it's Call of Duty, and it is what it is. That being said, that's it's sort of my evolution, my sort of look back at Warzone for the entirety of it, I guess. Kind of a different video from normal, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully it was a little bit nostalgic, and that's gonna wrap things up. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day. I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.